Good evening. Your man Diamond K in here. Of course, radioonfire.com, the Diamond K Show.com. Big news day. We've been having a lot of those. Of course, I am here daily, mornings and evenings, radioonfire.com, the Diamond K Show.com, YouTube, wherever you get your podcast from. So it's going to be a free-for-all soon. Right now, of course, the world in a pandemic, battling a pandemic. So the advisors for the FDA have given the green light to Moderna's coronavirus vaccine. And it is different from Pfizer's, which is the first one that they gave the emergency use to. So we're going to break that down. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about this second vaccine. And why do they have a second vaccine? You know, what is the purpose for? There are going to be many that are going to come out and get approved for emergency use. There are going to be many of them. More than these two. So this Moderna coronavirus vaccine, this candidate is similar to Pfizer's BioNTech vaccine that was authorized and shipped out for Americans earlier this week. It is different. There's some key differences. All right. Most importantly, and this vaccine is going to get into the arms of more people. And let me tell you why. Moderna's vaccine can be stored in normal freezers and does not require a super cold transportation network. It's going to make it more accessible for smaller facilities and local communities. The Pfizer vaccine has to be stored at super cold temperatures. The average person doesn't have that type of freezing mechanism. So this vaccine, this Moderna vaccine, is going to be available more widely. So the FDA's Vaccine Advisory Committee met today to review whether or not they recommended emergency use for Moderna's vaccine. The actual decision from the FDA is expected on Friday. So it's like this. They go to some of their friends and they say, hey, what you think about this? And they say, yeah, we think it's cool. Go ahead, take the meeting. Right? This is like the pre-meeting, the pre-interview before the interview. These are advisors. So the advisors say, yeah, it's cool. And tomorrow, the FDA is going to meet and they're going to make their decision. So let's talk more about this. Moderna is based out of Massachusetts, Cambridge to be exact. Pfizer is a pharmaceutical giant. They're the big dogs. Moderna, which is short for modified RNA. Moderna, modified RNA, right? It's a biotech company based in, as I said, in Massachusetts. So they're not as footprint is not as large as Pfizer. Moderna was established back in 2010. Here's another thing, this may disturb some people. Moderna has never brought a product to market or gotten any of its 9 or 10 vaccine candidates approved for use by the FDA. Let me say that again. Okay. Moderna has never brought a product to market or gotten any of its vaccine candidates approved for use by the FDA. It's also never even brought a product to phase 3 of a clinical trial before. This is all new ground for Moderna. So the company's scientists had already been collaborating with researchers from National Institutes of Health on vaccine for another coronavirus. This is why you have one of the main reasons why you have so much, fear mongering, so much of that going around, because there's a lot of coincidences going on, a lot of conspiracy theorists. There's a lot of meat for them to chomp on. So you mean to tell me that this company just happened to be collaborating with National Institutes of Health on a vaccine for another coronavirus, and then boom, this one comes, right? So some people are suspicious of this. Very suspicious of this, right? So they were collaborating on a vaccine for MERS, the Middle Eastern Respiratory Syndrome. That's what they were working on. And it's normal for them to be working on something. They're trying to bring something to market, and it's not an easy process, as you can imagine. So when Chinese researchers released the sequence of the novel coronavirus back in January, Moderna had a jump start on it because they were already working on something. All right, so the vaccine had developmental help from the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, the U.S. Biometric Advanced Research and Development Authority, known as BARDA, supported late-stage clinical trials and has helped with the manufacturing of this vaccine. So clinical trials for Moderna's vaccine started back in March 3rd to be exact. It was the first one out the gate because they had the head start. Its advanced stage clinical trial started over the summer, and it was the first government-funded phase 3 clinical trial for a COVID-19 vaccine in this country. So this is the one that was funded by the government, at least for the phase 3 trial, because we needed this. We still do, right? The company applied for the FDA's emergency use authorization back in November 30th. So people have got to understand something. There is a difference between FDA approval and emergency use. So how does this vaccine work? How does Moderna's vaccine work, and what is the efficacy of this? So they're saying that the Moderna vaccine was effective in preventing COVID-19 cases in total and in limiting severe COVID-19 during the trial period. So the efficacy of this vaccine that's coming from Moderna is close to 95%, occurring at least 14 days after the second dose. All right, so there are 2 doses of this. They have to be taken roughly a month apart, 28 days. So let's get to the numbers. In Moderna's trial, 15,000 study participants were given a placebo. That is a shot of saline, and that has no effect. That's nothing there. It just give you the placebo. All right. Over several months, 185 of them developed COVID-19, with 30 developing very serious forms of the disease. One of them actually died. So another 15,000 participants were given the vaccine. And of that group, 11 of them developed COVID-19. None of the 11 became seriously ill. So we're slow walking this. The vaccine was effective in various age groups, genders, racial and ethnic groups. Participants with medical comorbidities associated with the high risk of severe COVID-19. About 10% of the study participants were Black, 20% were Hispanic or Latino. So how does this thing work? How does it work? Okay. Once injected, the body's immune system makes antibodies to the spikes. If a vaccinated person is later exposed to the coronavirus, those antibodies should stand at the ready to attack the virus. So it's the same concept that they do with the flu vaccine. Now, we talked about Pfizer's vaccine, which has emergency use, which went out earlier this week. Moderna's is different. They're similar, but they're different. So the Moderna vaccine, the one that we're talking about now, is more flexible. Both Moderna and Pfizer's BioNTech vaccine have shown similar efficacy levels at around 95%. Roughly, they seem to be equivalent. Both of these vaccines rely on a RNA messenger to work. It's part of the makeup of the vaccine, but they work slightly different. The other thing, we're not going to get all the way deep in the weeds with it, but the storage of the vaccine, the cold storage. Most importantly, Moderna's vaccine does not need to be kept at super cold temperatures like Pfizer's. The Pfizer vaccine needs to be stored at about minus 75 degrees Celsius, about 50 degrees colder than any vaccine that is currently in use in this country. Also, the vaccine can be put in the refrigerator for only up to 5 days before it expires. So there's not a lot of shelf life on that. So to accommodate that, the CDC created a very complicated set of handling and storage requirements known as the cold chain. That includes an expensive ultra cold freezer and a whole lot of dry ice to make this whole thing work. Now, Moderna's, that can be kept at about minus 20 degrees Celsius. So pretty much the temperature of your home freezer. And that vaccine, the Moderna vaccine, can be kept in the refrigerator for about 1 month before it expires. So that's more manageable and much more commonly available. The differences suggest that Pfizer's vaccine may be used more for the major institutions with an established infrastructure, like a hospital, something like that. Moderna's is going to be going to the smaller facilities, like a local chain, a pharmacist, something like that. So, Moderna's vaccine is administered as two 100 microgram doses given about a month apart, 28 days. Pfizer's vaccine has two 30 microgram doses given about 3 weeks apart. If it is authorized, Moderna's vaccine would be used in people 18 and over, and Pfizer is for 16 and over. So young kids are not yet a favorable safety profile. So what else? What else happens? What are the side effects of Moderna's vaccine? The most common adverse reaction to the vaccine is, of course, one thing that you would expect, which is some injection site pain. Where they stuck the needle in your arm, it hurts right there. And that's pretty normal with vaccines. So you're going to get some fatigue, some headaches, some muscle, joint pain, chills. Swollen lymph nodes have also been reported. So overall, the frequency of non-fatal, obviously fatality would be the worst reaction, but the frequency of non-fatal serious adverse events was low and without meaningful imbalances between the group that received the vaccine and the group that received the placebo. So, one study participant talked about getting a low-grade fever, fatigue, and chills after getting that second shot. But he claims that he was fine the next morning. So just tuning in, it's your man Don McKay, RadioFire.com, the DonMcKayShow.com. We're talking about this Moderna vaccine that seems like it's getting ready to get approval for emergency use. Vaccine still has to be authorized now. So if that happens, if the FDA approves it for emergency use, you can expect shipments to begin 24 hours later, and then vaccines will arrive at facilities Monday morning. So 1 week after the Pfizer vaccine hit the market, or was made available for emergency use, there will be more than 6 million doses of Moderna's vaccine shipping from 3,200 sites, far more than the 636 sites that Pfizer's vaccines were shipped from. So this is a very interesting time. So why am I not more excited? Well, there's some other behind the scenes things that I want to talk about. There's some other behind the scenes things I want to talk about. And I want to talk about liability. So, of course, FDA advisors have recommended this second coronavirus vaccine, which is made by Moderna. It got the green light today from this advisory committee, and we're expecting the FDA to make their decision for emergency use tomorrow, on Friday. And all this is happening as the United States reports the single-day highs in new infections, hospitalizations, and deaths. California has become the epicenter of the outbreak that we're going through right now in the United States. In the past 48 hours, more than 100,000 new cases, and setting a daily death record, a brand new one. In Southern California, a region that includes Los Angeles, San Diego, ICU capacity fell to 0%. So the FDA says that Pfizer's BioNTech vaccine should continue to be used with no new restrictions, despite cases of severe allergic reactions. They haven't been talking about it that much, but there have been some severe allergic reactions to Pfizer's vaccine. Officials in several states said that they were alerted that their second shipments of Pfizer's BioNTech vaccine next week had been reduced. Also, French President Emmanuel Macron has tested positive for the coronavirus. Now, the Supreme Court ruled that a Kentucky Christian academy is not exempt from the governor's order that K-12 institutions must temporarily cease in-person classes. You know, they're trying everything. So another thing that I want to make sure that listeners are aware of: you cannot sue Pfizer or Moderna if you have severe COVID vaccine side effects. Let me say that again. You cannot sue Moderna or Pfizer if you have severe COVID-19 side effects. Also, the government is likely not going to compensate you for damages either. So that is something that a lot of mainstream outlets are not reporting. What they have done is they've created a legal shield for these companies, just in case things go wrong. So under the PrEP Act, companies like Pfizer and Moderna have total immunity from liability if something unintentionally goes wrong with their vaccines. Let me say that again. Under the PrEP Act, companies like Pfizer and Moderna have total immunity from liability if something unintentionally goes wrong with their vaccines. So I think that Americans need to know that. If you get some severe side effects after getting this vaccine, there is basically no one to blame in a U.S. court of law. The government has granted Pfizer and Moderna and companies like them immunity from this, any kind of liability. It's very rare for a blanket immunity law to be passed. And pharmaceutical companies typically aren't offered much liability protection under the law. And just if you were wondering, you also cannot sue the Food and Drug Administration for authorizing a vaccine for emergency use, nor can you hold your employer accountable if they mandate inoculation as a condition of employment. This is one of the many things that have me concerned. So they're immune to lawsuits. They are immune to lawsuits. There's a big reason for this unprecedented protection, and it has to do with this expedited timeline. Because there was so much pressure from the government to rush this stuff out, the companies needed something in return from the government. So they got immunity. The quickest vaccine ever developed was for the mumps. It took 4 years and was licensed in 1967. Pfizer's COVID-19 vaccine was developed and cleared for emergency use in 8 months. Let me say that again. Prior to now, the quickest vaccine ever developed was for the mumps, and it took 4 years. 4 years. This Pfizer COVID-19 vaccine developed and cleared for emergency use in 8 months. Less time than it takes to have a baby. So when you talk about mistrust, this is one of the things that causes mistrust. And the pressure that was put on by the Trump administration. One of the most untrustworthy group of politicians and business folks ever compiled in this country. So of course, people aren't going to trust it. Roughly 4 in 10 Americans say that they would definitely or probably not get the vaccine, according to Pew's Research Center. Now, this is lower than it was 2 months ago, but there is still a huge trust gap. And of course, drug makers continue to reassure the public that no shortcuts were taken. How is that possible? I just told you the quickest was 4 years. Everything with this was done in 8 months. How can you say no shortcuts were taken? How can you say that? So, it's one of those things. We're going to just have to wait and see. If that was the case, why would they need this legal immunity to be granted? Why would these pharmaceutical companies need to guard themselves in this way? Some are saying that it helps lower the cost of the immunizations. The government definitely does not want people suing companies that make the COVID-19 vaccine, because then the manufacturers would probably charge the government a higher price per dose. So of course the government the government trying to save their money. Yeah, so no one is going to be liable. The vaccine manufacturers are not the one giving the approval. So should the FDA be liable? Can you sue the government if you have an extraordinarily bad reaction to the vaccine? No, you cannot. You can't sue the FDA for approving or disapproving a drug. So that's part of its immunity, the sovereign immunity. So there are exceptions, but limited exceptions. But I don't think that they provide a viable legal path to hold the federal government responsible for any COVID vaccine injury. So this is a take it at your own risk kind of thing. This is definitely something that we're going to have to continue to follow. It is brand new. We don't know what's going to happen. So the vaccine's out there. Now, what I do want to do before we get out of here, I want to read you an FDA briefing document on Moderna's COVID-19 vaccine, dated December the 17th. It's entitled Vaccines Related Biological Products Advisory Committee Meeting. This is their briefing. It has a very extensive table of contents, and I'm going to read you the first paragraph of the executive summary. This is the first paragraph. And it says that on November 30th, 2020, Moderna submitted an emergency use authorization, EUA, request to the FDA for an investigation of the COVID-19 vaccine intended to prevent COVID-19 caused by severe acute respiratory syndrome coronavirus 2, also known as SARS. The vaccine is based on the SARS-CoV-2 spike, and the proposed use for the EUA is for active immunization for the prevention of COVID-19 caused by SARS-CoV-2 in individuals 18 years of age and older. We talk about how many doses is needed, which we have talked about. It gives some background on it. It talks a little bit about the emergency use request and talks about alternatives, for the prevention of COVID-19. So, no vaccine or other medical product is FDA approved for the prevention of COVID-19. So within this document, it says that no vaccine or medical product is FDA approved. So they're going to give you a whole bunch of emergency use authorizations, but that's not approval. That's not full approval. So it talks about on December 11th, the FDA issued an emergency use authorization for Pfizer BioNTech's COVID-19 vaccine in individuals 16 years and older. But it reinforces that Pfizer's BioNTech vaccine is not an approved product, and furthermore is not available in quantities sufficient to vaccinate all persons in the United States for whom the vaccine is authorized for use. And so they talk about several of the therapies currently available under the emergency use authorization. They are none of them are FDA approved treatment for COVID-19. There is, according to this document, this is the words, thus, there is currently no adequate, approved, and available alternative for the prevention of COVID-19. I want to make sure people understand that. This is a take at your own risk type of thing. So the document furthermore goes into dosing, proposed use under the emergency use authorization. But be clear, the FDA has not approved anything. What they have done is say that these can be used for emergency use, which is where we are, but they're not actually approving these vaccines. So the average person is not reading this executive summary. The average person does not know that. And there is this big push to get people to take the vaccine. The trust gap is there and will continue to be there as long as things are handled and done in this manner. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section. Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, TikTok, at The Diamond K Show, at Radio on Fire. And, of course, I'll be back here tomorrow for another edition of the program. Christmas night. Make sure you join us 6 p.m. for the Jingle Jam, the voters rally and virtual concert Christmas night, the ever important Georgia Senate runoff taking place next month, and we want Georgians to get excited about it and make sure that they vote. Mainstream media often promotes misinformation. Radio on Fire provides Americans unapologetic, progressive news coverage and opinion. Our outlet challenges the establishment and provides a platform for people to demand positive change while speaking truth to power. As I said, I will be here tomorrow. RadioOnFire.com if you miss any episodes of the show. Check us on YouTube.com/RadioOnFire, YouTube.com/DJ Diamond K.